Dairy production finished. Gold produced over in blue's hand, or coins produced over in blue's hands. Nothing too exciting, although we're pretty sure yellow's going to trump here because they're in range to grab a gold here. This oil is incredibly available to them, but might be at risk. So they got a couple of another gold here that's in range that they could maybe grab. So they've got a number of things that they kind of want that they're going to have to work to grab, resources that I'll have time to process over there. Some of the mines are beginning to tap out. Mine 15 here is done. I didn't sink another shaft on that. If I get time or effort, yeah, but right now it seems more important to grab things and move them forward. Try to end the game quickly before those rowboats are able to pull more crap in than I'm able to pull. You see mine 5 here also running low. That one may be pretty important to Black. He doesn't have a lot of opportunity. You'll notice though Black doesn't have this technology. Green actually has that. I think he's the only one with it, which allows you to say, hey, I'm just going to throw 4 gold in here because there's so much iron kicking around. Everybody, for whatever reason, went with the big mines, figuring, yeah, I'll need the iron. And you do need it for some things, perhaps, but without us building boats and the steamships and the trucks, there's no real need for it. I don't know if anybody else is going to trump this. Chances are Blue's not going to get to this. So they probably aren't going to. Chances are Green's not going to get to this. You know, when you look at it and you say, oh, I lose that anyway against the only viable competitor, there's no real reason to trump in. Right, and further building, we'll finally get an oil here. Some roads beginning to be carved out for people who want to build their stock markets, although Green's got a problem because they haven't been producing oil, so they finally got their oil well. So they're a little behind on that stock market situation, even though they have I don't know what they have. They have some paper coming, but we'll see how they catch up in terms of actually minting those coins. One thing when Black upgraded one of their mines, or increased one of their mines, the big increase, 5 of each. I'm thinking about these little clear plastic bags and what kind of solution they are. They've been bothering me because, well, it's easy to see what's in the mine, so you kind of have to look away when you're drawing from it. It's also kind of tight for your fingers. But on the other hand, being able to see what's in the mine is actually an important facet. So, you know, I guess they're probably the best solution, because you want to be able to look and say, oh, what do I have in there? Just an iron? Yeah, this is a time when I do want to do the upgrade. So that's something we saw over there. These, like iron floating out here, this is actually only allowed because of the oil rig. You can stock materials on an oil rig, which is necessary because it produces oil, right? I don't have it covering the oil rig, which might seem more reasonable simply because I use that notationally, just as I would with like production over here, to indicate that something's been used, that it's actually already produced. I don't do that with the secondary production buildings, and I gotta be careful about that in some cases. Usually I can keep myself in mind. If worse comes to worse, I can flip the counter over if it's used up. But in some cases, something like this gets to be used 3 times, so I may have to use some other notation in a few rare cases, not very often. I forgot to mention over here, Black and Blue both were able to scrape out another brick. It's hard to tell whether or not you want to do this, you know. Since nobody's really trying to push it, there's kind of a, well, you know, maybe that means an extra turn or 2 of production that I'll get, but neither of them feel like they're particularly ahead in the process. So scoring some points there might help them in terms of getting to actually issuing some stock. Not sure what else to say about that. We're getting close to the end. I mean, if this was a two-player game, it would be here. The question is, how much are people willing to throw into that? And nobody's willing to hurt themselves because it's not the most efficient way to make points that they can see on the horizon anymore. Early on, it looked like a really good way to score points, but at this point, the chances of getting coins at least, which are an increase of 20 points. And this is important. Coins take less space on your transports than gold does. And paper takes less space than coins do. That's important because if somebody built a truck or something, they could go raiding the other person's money supply. So there's all this gold sitting around out here. If somebody really made a threat of that, now without a truck, it's hard because those are inland in this game. They don't have to be though, and they're not terribly exposed. Yes, there's a road there, but a donkey can only go 2 spaces on a road. But a truck can run 4 spaces on the road, and that's enough to really, really open up a threat. So if somebody was very, very ambitious, they could build a truck to go raid someone else's victory points, essentially. I don't think we're going to see that in this game, although I do like testing out strategies. I'm very conservative when I'm learning a game, and I don't want to veer too much. Although if somebody felt they were behind, they probably should do that. It's kind of like the 18XX. You see me always playing a very conservative game that I've learned there, usually, rather than, oh geez, I'm not going to come in first, I should shake things up. Well, I don't believe in shaking things up in 18XX if I'm in second or third place, unless I know that I'm going to gain ground on the first place player. Here, I don't feel quite that same element because it's victory points rather than money. I don't know why that happens, but somehow, the representation of what the victory conditions are, this feels like more of an abstract game, even though in some ways it really isn't, All right. So, not a whole hell of a lot happening right now. Green isn't building a road yet because they have enough rocks, even if they're not going to get them in place in this next move, to build the stock market. And there's a lot of that kind of consideration that's going on here where, I could build something, but it's not going to help my situation. One of the I guess the only really exciting thing I can show as a chart is black bought one of these, blue bought a couple of these. Nobody did anything too exciting. We saw some coins built, but I don't know who built them. The whole game at this point is reminding me of certain other Euros and also of stages of 18XX where nothing's really happening that I can show. In XX when the train routes are built, there's really not much to show on the map. Now, in XX there's one thing to show that really kind of highlights and punctuates between stations, and I guess maybe in some sense this is a part of that, which is, oh look, some stocks changed hands, the valuations changed, you can see how much, oh here's how much money was brought in because it's being recorded maybe on paper in that final round or whatever. Here there's not anything that I can step into and show as, yeah, there's progress being made. I could count the coins, I could count victory points. I don't like doing that to begin with, but there's no real visual to just look at and say, yeah, we've got a pretty good grasp on what's going on at this point. The only thing I can really say is green trumped in this time. I think they got an extra gold out of it. hauled into place, or maybe an oil, I'm not sure which. You know, that's how much things kind of, I think it's this gold under here, yeah. But that's how much things kind of disappear from memory, and how little the game is, you're able to recall what the big moves are. Compare that to, say, Go, where there's this formation that's being created with every play, and you almost remember every single action. There's no way you can do that on something of this nature. This is more like a common war game in terms of, hey, there's a lot of stuff moving, except there's no broad general principle. The only broad general principle is my stuff's moving around, grabbing stuff and processing it. You know, that doesn't make it a bad game, but it makes it a terrible, terrible subject for these videos, I fear. Pretty close to the end of time here. It looks like no one person is going to be able to end it. But if a set of people decide, I'm not going to be able to get a stock market, they may all set it up so that they can buy, you know, if 3 people each buy 1, or if 1 person buys 2 and 1 person buys 1 brick, we will be at the end on this turn. Blue is dropping a bid in so that they get to go first. And the reason for that is there's a gold here. Each gold that you have in your possession is worth 10 points. But to be in your possession, it has to be on one of your transports. That's going to be kind of a problem where I'm kind of stockpiling gold. We had, I think only 1 coin got built this turn, because the networks just aren't pushing stuff through the way that maybe I foresaw them as doing so. Maybe I've been concentrating a little bit on trying to get to that jump up to a stock market. Nobody's set up to build a stock market yet. There may be people who can. I think there could be one here, which means if the game lasts longer, he's got a lot of points to gain. Same here, maybe. He's back. He's missing a stone, so he's not going to be able to build it. So it looks to me, given the transport mechanisms we have in place, that yellow has the most to gain by the game going longer. So everybody probably will try to build a brick this turn. That has a problem because it means you have to commit somebody to your home territory, but that's not too hard. All your gold and everything is near there, so I think this will probably be the last turn. We'll see if it works out that way. People other than yellow have moved enough resources into their home areas that we're certainly not going to see another turn. Which is a shame, because yellow was set up to build their stock market. They have a couple of coins and a paper there. They wouldn't get to, when they build it, they're not going to get to convert it this turn. They're just going to miss by 1 turn, just because everybody else said, hey, screw this, man. That's big points for them. So there goes any chance of the stocks happening. But we'll finish up the production, just because, I don't know, it seems like the thing to do. It's interesting, at the end of the game, I had to look this up, you don't play out the turn. So if 4 bricks are built, that's it. Boom, it's over. And therefore, everybody's going to make a bid here. So black will bid for first. Then we have yellow, who isn't planning on building any. They're going to pass on their build. Green will bid and go second. And blue's already in 3rd place, so they will not bid. Black's first bid puts them all the way in the back. And then we get to see what how much production we have. So 2 is the base. 3, 4, 5, and that's all I get to build is 2. 2 of these, which means if green gets 2, which I think they do, whatever happens, they kind of boned blue out of this. Now, blue is the guy who started this movement of, hey, let's end the game here. But they're going to get shafted by it because green has a lot of stuff. Enough to buy 2, certainly. 2, 1, 2, 3, and that's all there is. I don't even get to complete my actions there. I just get 2. And now we score. And for scoring, well, this is going to be kind of complicated. I'm going to take it offline with paper. But, you know, for example, here, this is worth 10 points divided 4 ways, is 2 points each. Let's see how the rounding works on that. Is it always rounded down? Yep, it's always rounded down. So everybody, all 4 players get 2 points here. 3 players get 3 points here, etc. Then on top of that, each gold nugget that's on top of a transport, and they all made their way on top of a transport, is worth 10. Each coin is worth 40. Nobody made any stock certificates. They'd be worth 120. Of course, you'd have to turn in, you know, 2 10s and then later 2 40s in order to do it. But obviously, they compact into nice value. I'll be back in a minute. Jeez. So I scored up the points that they got for the Wonder, and blue led on that with 36 points, closely followed black 34, 29 for green, 20 for yellow. These are all just, you know, little bits of points, 3 here, 5 there, whatever, but they do add up. In gold, everyone but black had gold. Gold converted everything to coins. Everyone but green had 80 points in coins. So green did a screw up, and they managed not to get oil until late in the game, and it was too late. So they didn't score, they didn't turn their gold into coins. They ended up with a pile of gold, but you can see yellow and blue also had gold. And, well, it's a 6-point game. Obviously, there were a couple of factors in play. I think people were rushing that early, maybe spending, but the points are kind of economical early. But then later, there was this attitude of pumping, say blue was pumping wood through and scoring points. Now it worked for them because they closed out yellow, but against a more competent yellow, obviously a more competent yellow probably would have succeeded in getting a piece of paper, in getting this cranked out just a little bit earlier. Yellow had some real problems though, one of which was, and both blue and yellow did this, putting a donkey here. It didn't feel terribly useful, but it was helpful because it meant that your boat, which is a much more expensive resource, wasn't necessary. You could have the donkey there at the location where you thought you could produce the gold, and I think that actually worked pretty well. However, what it meant was one of my main land transports was not available, and that may have been a factor coming into yellow not being able to build their stock market. Another factor is yellow was working on rafts where everyone else was using rowboats. So they had a lot less movement, so it was harder for them to go grab the stones and bring them into play. And because they didn't have as many stones, their road networks maybe weren't as developed as some of these others. Some of those others also maybe worried a little bit more about stones. I'm not sure. One thing that yellow had a disadvantage in, although they seem to have overcome it largely, was their mining situation was just not as rich as those that the people who did the technology did. Again, the fact that I'm not a competent player is why nobody got that stock market out. I'm pretty convinced. This is a fairly easy board from what I can tell. But what I've heard is, yeah, if you're a new player, chances are you are, you know, it's a crapshoot whether or not you get a stock market built and you get the paper out. I was one turn off, you know. If people hadn't rushed it as much, if other people had been competent, then the dynamics would have been less towards that. Of course, there was some cheating going on. The geese I changed the rule on that retroactively simply because I didn't want to try to fix the play. There was nothing I could do. It doesn't really hurt things to have that kind of change in the game, I don't think. I don't think it's that tightly balanced about all the mechanisms. It's fairly tight, though, so, you know, it could affect it. It certainly could affect whether or not I was able to get something out, right? There were some weird moves like green stealing all the geese. That was kind of painful, but I'm not really sure that an additional tech would have helped here. Attempts to use this, build an auto factory or something like that, they didn't happen. There was a space available on both sides of the board for an additional building that, you know, wasn't accounted for. And if somebody did something like, this would be weird, but build a stock market there or whatever, that would be a really, if they were planning on that, they would be able to, say, build their truck factory back here. And that would have been an interesting situation. Overall, though, you know, there's a lot that you have to juggle around in your head, and it doesn't work out terribly well. Solitaire to play in so many players. This is all the players that my game handles. I know there's an expansion that adds a 5th and 6th player, which, you know, the game can certainly support it. There's no question that, like, you could tinker around with this. You know, the board sizes are all about this size, but you could make it a bigger, longer game. I'm going to get into, when I look at the review, taking a peek at the expansion and what it adds to the game. I feel glad that I didn't add more complexity in right away, but I do have sort of a desire to not necessarily add what's in there, which is more transportation options, which isn't bad, but to actually have different paths of production. There are already a couple. There just aren't very many. So for the most part, you have this, you got to build wood, you got to build rock. You don't have much option there. But you can go the clay route with rock if you don't have one of these gray spaces next to you. So there is already a branching there. But the branch on fuel is kind of one of the big ones. You don't have to have water near you to build fuel. But you absolutely need wood, and you need either rock or a coastal area to possibly progress anywhere in this game. Once you have those things, you can get pretty far. You're going to need mines to score points in it, so you're going to need mountains. But, yeah, you know, they just have to be on the board. So knowing these things, I feel like conceivably I could be involved in a game in which the board was being built by the players. The question is how you go about that. And, you know, my initial thoughts, which were, hey, shuffle a bunch of pieces and deal them out randomly. I don't think that works very well. I think the only way that really does work is to let the players place whatever the hell they want. And, you know, we didn't see rivers in this either. Those are an additional hindrance, but also a place where your boats can sail. So they can be both they can be a roadway that runs through the other things. And the more mobile things are, the more violent they are. So if somebody had built trucks, they were going to go raiding, right? A steamship, well, boats have an interesting place in this, in that if you get one of those big boats, or even maybe the truck, they can hold enough material that they can become kind of storage houses for your victory points. That puts a limit on how big you want to make the game. Like, do you want to add a road to the wonder or whatever? My feeling is that's where the game is kind of tight, and if you do too much tweaking around the edges with that, you're going to get a problem. Anyway, I think I'm going way outside the scope of the wrap of this game. So I'll send this one up, and we'll be back with a review at some point tonight, probably.